Am I on? Okay. Thank you very much, Pastor. First, I have to say how honored I am that you would turn your pulpit over to me, because I'm honored to be here. I really am, and especially on a Memorial Day weekend when it's got so many memories for me. Memorial Day, we usually think about the military for some reason, because that's the reason for Memorial Day. We have memories of our lost ones that lost their lives fighting for this country. First of all, how many other veterans are in the room? Please stand. Stand up. Give them a hand. Thank you all. Thank you for your service too. My family is here intact. I got quite a few of them here. And I've got a million notes here. I always carry a lot of notes, and you know what? Once I start, I won't even need them. I don't use them. This picture just kind of flows to me. I'm going to tell you a story about a young fella who went to Anoka High School, graduated in 1943, and 3 weeks later was in the Army. Now, I had a choice. I could go in the Navy, I could go Air Force, I could go Marines, or I could go Army. Well, I chose Army. And the reason I took Army is because back then they had a little plan called Army Specialized Training Program, ASTP. And what it meant was you took a basic training in the Army, and then you were sent to a college, different colleges all over the country. And at those colleges you were taught engineering, and you were taught Army rules, and you were taught different things to prepare you to be a leader in the Army. So I went and took basic training down in Georgia, the infantry school, and then I was sent up to Boston College. And we went to school up there. There must have been 500 of us up there. We went to school for, I guess, 2 terms. Anyway, in the spring of the year, there was a big breakthrough in Africa at a place called El Alamein. Rommel broke through, and he was pushing the British into the ocean, and they thought that they were going to lose Africa. So what did they do? An order came down from Washington. Everybody that had infantry training was to go immediately into a unit training to go overseas, and then you would be sent over, because they had to have troops over there right away. So I was sent to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. I joined a little outfit called the Yankee Division, YD. It was from Boston, Massachusetts. It was made up of drunks. It was. It was the National Guard of Boston, and these guys were all a little bit older guys. They were like 25 to 40 years old. And when I say they were drunks, I mean they were all drunks, every one of them. And they were nasty and mean to us kids. We were all kids. I was 18 years old. And we had to put up with these guys, and you didn't dare say anything. They were all sergeants. So anyway, we went through that basic training, and finally we got ready to come overseas. Oh, I got to tell you a story. I'll tell you one story. There are some humorous things in here too, along with the basic stuff. And some of you have heard these stories before, but I'm going to tell you one anyhow. It's kind of funny. We had these sergeants were always picking on us, and they knew they could get away with this. What could we say? If you said anything, they'd detain you or give you some duties or something. You know, you couldn't say anything. So one day they set up a boxing ring out in the middle of the field, and they said, "We're going to teach you young fellas a lesson. We got a guy here by the name of Benny Violet, one of the sergeants, he's a boxer, and he's going to give you guys a little boxing lesson in the ring." So he took the guys one at a time into the ring, and he beat the heck out of them, because he didn't have a chance against the guy. And finally it was my turn, and I told him, "I'm not going to fight the guy." And finally they got around to the yellow stuff, how they'll taunt you. So I said, "All right, I'll fight the guy." So I got in the ring. Little did they know that I had been the state Golden Glove champion for 2 years in Minnesota. And I was small. I was only 143 pounds, but I weighed 112 when I won my first Golden Glove tournament in Minneapolis. And I think I hit the guy 6 or 7 times before he went through the ropes. They caught him out there. And anyhow, that ended the bullying. You should have seen them afterwards with their arm around you. "Oh, but you're okay. Come on, you're all right," this kind of stuff. So it had its purpose, I guess. And that's just one of the funny things that happened. Anyway, after our training, one day we get the word while we were out in the field that the invasion had started in Europe. And that's what we were training for, was to go for an invasion. And anyhow, we didn't know really what to think. We were ready. We were as trained as you could get. We had a good outfit. By that time, we were mesh, young guys and old guys, and we had a good, solid division. And so we were shipped to New York one night, in the middle of the night, and the next day we were on a ship. And you take a room about, well, it wasn't even as big as this corner. There'd be about 20 guys in there, bunks that were triple-decked like this. If the ship had been torpedoed, we were all drowned because there's no way to get out of there. And when we got over, we thought we were going to England. And instead of that, they took us right over to Cherbourg, France, on Utah Beach. Now, we didn't go in on the original invasion. I've told everybody that. We came in about a month late. They were already in about 10 miles deep in some places and up to 60 miles in other places. But there was still a lot of action where we were. And we lived at just east of Cherbourg, which is a city up in northwestern France. And we had our share of fun in there. We went up and they put us in foxholes. And the first night we were in the foxholes, there was a foxhole here, me and a kid by the name of Lindsay in it. There was another hole about 10 feet away, and I'll never forget the two that were in there. One of them, his name was Wells, and the other guy was, I can't think of it right now. Anyway, a German patrol came through there that night. Where'd they throw the grenade? In their hole, and killed them both. They never touched us. We heard the blast and woke up and didn't know what happened until morning. So that's one of the times when I was protected. And incidentally, I was protected. The Lord had his hands around me, you wouldn't believe. I had angels above me, behind me, below me, above me, side of me, everywhere. I had to have. There's no way that you could live through what I did without heavenly protection. So anyway, we went into the war, and here we go. Now, our first attack, this is something I've never told you guys. On our very first attack, we ran into German machine guns above a hill on us. And there was 6 or 7 of them up there, and they had us down below where they could really comb us down there, and it was really bad. We were on our bellies trying to climb up that hill, and we had orders to take that hill. And all we had to take it with was hand grenades because you couldn't rise up to shoot. Some of them tried it, and they were dead in about 2 seconds. So I had 7 grenades, and all you did is you lobbed them up there like this. And then you'd put your head down and hear the explosion and hope you got something. Well, as it turned out, there was 3 or 4 of us were throwing grenades, and we wiped them all out. Just cleaned them all out. All of a sudden, the shooting stopped, and then we realized that we had them. And you don't know who killed who, but I know that we killed a lot of Germans up there on that hill, and it stopped it so that the advancement could go through. Now, in Cherbourg, that is the old area where for thousands of years, they've been raising grapes in that area. And so they've got these, what they call hedgerows up there. Now, a hedgerow is a growing of real thick brush that's been growing for a couple of thousand years, dividing these properties. And then they'd pile the rocks from the field down there, too. And they had hedgerows that would be maybe 8 or 10 feet high and about 20 feet thick. And they're impenetrable. Our tanks couldn't go through them. You had to have a road through there or you couldn't go through. So what we did is we were issued a little clicker. I tried to find mine. I couldn't find it. I was going to bring it along. I don't know where it went. It's a little baby clicker like you had when you were a kid. Click, 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 that kind of a thing. And what you did is when you saw somebody through that hedgerow, you clicked. If you didn't hear a click back, you emptied your rifle through there at them. Because that had to be an enemy. We had orders when you heard a click, you clicked back so that you know that it's one of yours. That was one of the funny things that happened there. And so you carried that clicker in your hand. You didn't want it in your pocket. You wanted to be able to get it real fast. It's kind of a funny one. After we were in combat for about 2 or 3 months, it got to be October, November, and we were taken to a city called Metz, M-E-T-Z. Metz was an old French town of like 1,500 years old, and there was a fort built there in the ground, all of solid cement. And the Germans had left a division in that fort, And the Americans just surrounded it and left them in there and bypassed it and just went on. They were useless to the German army in there, and the Americans didn't want to waste any lives trying to get them out of there. So we were put on duty to surround that thing and just sit there and wait them out. Well, while we were in there, we took a tremendous shelling from inside that fort. They must have fired everything they had out of there, and the next day they surrendered. And they came up out of that hole carrying white flags, so we were in on the surrender of a whole division right there. So then we were lucky. They blessed us with showers and clean clothes. Hallelujah. And if you think that isn't a thrill. So what we did is we're having showers, we're eating good, we're getting hot food, and all of a sudden the Battle of the Bulge starts. Hitler sent everything he had left, headed towards Antwerp from Germany. They were going to smash through, split the Allies, and make us sue for peace. That was the object of it. So what did they do? We had no time at all. They said within 1 hour we're leaving. You took what you could, you headed off down the road, and everybody started walking. Trucks would come and pick the last ones up and take them up to the front and drop them off and then come back and get the last one. So you kind of shuttled it. I rode 2 or 3 times that way. The rest of the time you walked. And we had to go about 70 miles, 80 miles to get up to Luxembourg. And that's where we went into battle for the first time against the Germans there. And that was quite an experience. You know, I don't know how many of you have read about the Battle of the Bulge, but it was horrible in that we were fighting the Germans, but we were fighting the weather more. The weather was so cold, the snow was up to your waist at times. It got to 20 below zero, and we didn't have any warm clothes. We had no fur socks, we had no fur mittens, we had just our helmet liners to keep you warm. We didn't have any gloves, nothing like that. Oh, they were sent to us, but they never got there. There's 7 or 8 men behind every guy that's on the front line. There's cooks and mail clerks and that kind of thing, but there's 7 or 8. They got all that equipment. They took it all, never sent any of it up to the front. So we froze, and that was the hardest part of all. I don't know anyone that was in Belgium or Luxembourg with us that's alive yet today that doesn't have frozen feet and have trouble walking. My feet are numb from half the feet forward. They were black. At one time they considered amputating. A lot of them did have their feet taken off. And that was the worst thing. Along with it, remember, your face is cold, your hands are cold, you're hungry, you're tired, you're scared. That was worse than the Germans. It was almost fun when we had a chance to shoot at somebody. That seems weird, but it's true. Larry, you can attest to some of this. Larry's also a combat veteran. I wanted to tell you just a couple stories that happened in the Battle of the Bulge, because it's quite interesting, and that's the thing that decided the war. It was so important up there. Our division, when we hit the Battle of the Bulge, was not ready like the Germans were. The Germans had been issued white clothing, and all it was like a big grain sack you put over you with sleeves on it. And in the snow, it's darn hard to see them. Whereas we must stuck out like a thumb coming through that snow in our black clothes, our dark clothes. At one time we were going along, a bunch of us, and we were on a skirmish line like this. That means that you spread out about 6 feet apart. You're going through the woods like this. And all of a sudden we hear a noise behind us and we turn around. There was a whole bunch of Germans behind us. They were laying in the snow with this white clothes. We never saw them. Went right past them. They could have murdered us all. They got up and surrendered. That's another break from the Lord. It has to be. We were going along one of those days, and me and 2 other fellas, I'll never forget them because they were right here, we got raked by what we call a German machine pistol. We called them burp guns. The reason you called them a burp gun, it sounded like a belch. It'd go burp, burp, and fire 30 or 40 bullets that quick. It's the fastest gun ever made, and it still is. There's never been a gun made that would fire faster. And when you take that and rake it like this, there's got to be a bullet every inch. It killed both of them and didn't touch me. Now you tell me how. Never hit me. And he went right across just like that. That's the angels again. It's got to be. I can tell you, I don't know how many times when I was saved like that. I'll think of some more of them as we go. But it's just remarkable what the Lord can do. He must have saved me for something. I'm the last one left from my company. My buddy and I, a kid by the name of McGee from Texas, came home on the ship. We were the last two from the original company to come home. They weren't all killed. Some of them had gone home in hospitals and stuff. But we were the last two to come home with the company. He died on me here a few months ago. And that leaves me as the last one. And I've often wondered if I'm not supposed to be the oldest combat veteran ever someday. You know, at 18 and 19 in combat, they don't get much younger. Because at 17 and 18, you're still in training. Like the kids that followed us by 1 year, they didn't see any combat. They came over and took our place when it was over. So maybe someday I'll be the oldest living combat veteran. Who knows? Maybe God's got a purpose. I don't know what it is, but I'm anxious to find out and to learn. Combat is not fun. We're getting into Memorial Day, and I'm starting to think about it. It makes me sad. If I break up, please excuse me. War is hell. And it's nothing like you see in the movies. Nothing. I don't care what you've seen in the movies. You've never seen what war is. You can take the worst scene you ever saw, multiply it by 1,000. It still isn't as bad as being there. And I suppose the reason is because you know you can go home and get away from it. When you're in combat, there is no getting away from it or going home or getting some food or getting warm. You just have to take it and like it. That's probably the main reason why they like to have us young guys instead of the married men in there with families. We didn't have the worries. No, we were scared. When we first went into combat, I wasn't scared of anything. I wasn't scared at all until the first shelling came. Ooh, do you learn in a hurry? And that old saying, there's no atheists in foxholes, is pretty much true. We had a lot of guys that we used the Lord's name in vain, just solid all day long. They didn't believe in anything. But when the shells come in, God, where are you? Help me. They're all for it then. Isn't that something? It's amazing, isn't it? Well, let's go back to the war. We finally defeated the Germans in that Battle of the Bulge. We gave them a pretty good licking, as you know, from reading about history now. I'm reading quite a book on it now that a guy gave me. It's the best historian ever wrote this thing, and it's just a super book about that thing. It tells the why-fors of everything that happened, goes behind the scenes 2 years to explain what happened in the build-up. So there was a lot to this war thing. I wanted to tell you a few more stories while we were up in there, some horror stories so that you can see what war is like. I'm going to tell you about a friend of mine. I told you about this one. His name was Joe Hrusecki, Polish kid from Philadelphia or Pittsburgh, somewhere in Pennsylvania. And Joe joined us as a replacement, and he was all life, hepped up. He was a joy to have around because he was an optimist. And his pet saying was to anybody that felt down, stick with me, you'll be wearing diamonds. He kept saying that all the time. Stick with me, you'll be wearing diamonds. When we go home, you'll be wearing diamonds if you stick with me. I was sitting there talking with him. I was standing like this on the steps going into a little shed, and Joel was right there. And we were kind of talking. I turned like this to say something to somebody. Boom! I turned around, and Joe had completely disappeared. All was left was a pile of guts with a shaking leg on it like this. That was Joe. He was gone. Disappeared. A mortar shell apparently had come right down on his head and took him out. I didn't even get any concussion from it. But I picked up his dog tags, so they were laying there, and I kept them for the medics so they could see who it was. He had no way of telling otherwise. That's just another close call for me. I didn't get touched. I was this far away. Ridiculous. We had a new second lieutenant come in. And we liked the kid about this. He was also from somewhere in Philadelphia, and he was a lawyer. And he thought he was Patton himself. He thought he was really something. And he didn't know anything about combat. but he was a real jerk. McGee and I one day, we were in a holding action. McGee and I dug us a nice foxhole, and there were some pine trees there. So we took our bayonets and we chopped off a whole bunch of pine boughs, put them over the top. We put some down inside. Now we got down in there, and it was just a little bit like home, you know. It was only 15 degrees below in there instead of being cold. So we were down in that foxhole enjoying life. And we even accumulated a can of Sterno somewhere, and we lit that, and it's like a candle. It keeps you warm a little. And along comes Lieutenant Kuhar. He says, well, what do you boys got here? And he looks down in there, and he says, I'll tell you what. I'm going to make this the command post. You two go up ahead there and dig in, and this will be the command post. I looked at McGee, and he looked at me, and we said, yes, sir. And we jumped out of the hole and took our little shovels off and shoveled the dirt back in the hole. And he's standing there blustering, and we filled it full. And he said, you two are now privates. We were both buck sergeants at the time. You two are now buck privates. That's another time when we didn't get along. So McGee told him. McGee said, sir, we can't see you in combat. He said, you should take your first lieutenant stripe and have it painted big on your helmet so we can see you. We can't tell who you are from a distance. He said, oh, do you think that'd help? He says, of course it would. That's just what the German sniper was looking for, was that target. I don't know if he ever did it or not, but we hoped he would. Anyhow, I got broke 3 times down to a private from that because of that guy. And I guess I wasn't the only one. Another time we had a German tank was coming at us, a German Tiger tank. The Tiger tank was the most feared war implement of our war. It had our tanks outgunned, outmanned. It took 6 of our Sherman tanks to stand up to one of those tanks, is the way they figured it. And here comes this tank over the hill. And I've got the bazooka that week. Every week one man has it. A bazooka is like a pipe, and they put a thing in it. You aim it, you pull it, and it goes whoosh, and that thing is like a rocket. Anyhow, it was my turn to have the bazooka that week. So here comes the tank. You're supposed to go up. That's what the bazooka's for. Only we didn't have any ammunition. There was a strike in the United States at that time, an ammunition strike. We had no bazooka ammunition whatsoever. So I told him, I said, what do you want me to do? And he said, I want you to go out and kneel in front of that tank and point your bazooka at him and pretend like you're going to shoot and scare him away. You don't scare a German tank away when he's coming at you with that 88 pointed at you. So I said, no, sir. I said, you do it. He said, okay, private. So he broke me again. The only reason I kept getting advanced back to sergeant, I was one of the oldest guys by then in the company from death, so they had to advance us up because we had the experience, guys like McGee and me. And that German 88 I was telling you about that's on those tanks, there's 88 millimeters. You know what that is? That's 3.5 inches, something like that. That was the greatest gun of the war, too. It was the most powerful thing. They even called it a rifle, because it was like a rifle. They could shoot straight ahead or they could shoot 5 miles this way with that thing, and it was powerful. And that's what the Germans used, was that 88. So whenever we got injured, when we had a lot of guys that would start to cry in combat, and you can imagine what it's like. Kids break down. They do it now. They call it breakdowns, and they have them all the time in Iraq and these other places. They would give us what they called a blue 88. That's what we called them. We nicknamed it. A blue 88 would knock you cold. It was just like a knockout pill. And while you're still knocked out, they put you on a truck and take you back up to the front. I know, I had one once. One night we were in an old bombed out building. McGee and me and, I don't know, a couple other guys. I'd never smoked in my life, and these guys lit up cigarettes. You want one, Joe? Why not? I've never had one in my life. Why not? I'll have one. I might be dead tomorrow. So they gave me a cigarette in the dark, and I lit the thing. I thought, this is horrible. How can anybody smoke something like this? Well, it turned out, back then, you got cigarettes in your K rations. There's 4 cigarettes a day came in your little K ration. It's a square box like this. And Raleigh's was a popular cigarette back then. And Raleigh's was cork tipped. Guess which end I lit? That's why it smelled and tasted so bad. Just horrible. These guys left, but they didn't say anything to me. Just crazy things. We had funny things happen like that. I'll tell you one that happened that we thought was kind of funny at the time. When you think about it, it's pathetic. We were in a holding action, and there was an anti-aircraft battalion set up because Germans were strafing us with their planes. And here comes a plane low across the trees, and these guys in the battalion, let's get him, boom, 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 boom. And they hit it. And the plane is coming down, and they're hollering, we got him, and they're cheering. Just before it hit the ground, we could see the star on it. It was one of ours. See the humor in it? They shot down one of ours. When we got to Germany, Germany was getting pretty well smashed by then. The bombing had taken its toll. The men were almost all gone in there. Young boys were even in the army. We ran into women in the front lines. We were up against women in several battles. And so the towns were more or less deserted except for real old people. So when we'd hit a town, we'd have a chance to get down in the basement, and there's two things that we found down there that we could use. One was like sausage or bologna and sauerkraut and beer. They had those three things. I wasn't a beer drinker, but I drank a few just to have some liquid. We had a lot of snow back in those days. There was a lot of snow then. Well, finally we got to the Rhine River. Now, the Rhine River had one bridge at a town called Remagen that didn't get blown up. The Germans forgot it, or they were careless, or something. And a lot of our troops crossed at Remagen. Right below it, they put a bull rope across the thing. And we went across holding onto that bull rope in the water. The rope about this big around, like they used to anchor these big ships. You know, you've seen those ropes. And we held on to that. That's how you got across. And when you get to the other side and you're wringing wet, well, be warm, boys. It's cold weather. You turn to ice almost immediately. And like I say, the weather, the things like that are much worse than the enemy. The enemy, you got to remember, was just as scared as we were. And he was just as inexperienced or experienced as we were. They were just as hungry and cold as we were. So it wasn't them so much as it was the weather. Weather was worsening. And commanders like Patton. Patton was one of the worst commanders ever. You hear accolades about Patton, what a great commander he was. He was great so long as it's his guts and your blood. How easy it would be if there was a gang of terrorists came through the door and pastor stood up and said, all right, the first 10 men, get up there and charge them. We're all going to die. The first 10 are going to die. That's easy for him to do. That's what Patton would do. No wonder you win a battle. Instead of going up there and leading it like he's supposed to. I saw Patton one time. He was a very pompous man. He pulled up in his little half-track and he stood up like this on it. Turned sideways purposely so you can see his pearl-handled pistol. He had that. And he wouldn't stand this way. He's got to be this way so you can see it. Like this. And that's just the way he was. Very pompous. And he had on fur boots. He had on a fur hat. He had on fur mittens. And a full-size picture of that, a painting of him standing there, is down at the Minnesota Veterans Home, down on the island down there. I saw it down there. I was surprised to see it. So he had warm clothes, and he didn't need them because he was in a tent every night anyhow. But I never thought much of him as a commander, and here's why. When we were in that Battle of the Bulge, the worst shelling that we had one day came about because we could not dig into the ground. We couldn't even get into the snow. We couldn't go that far. If you could scrape a hole this far and lay it in it, you had a 90% chance of living because shrapnel went over you like this. Those things explode and it flies. So you had a chance, but not if you're above the ground. He took away our entrenching tool. That's that little shovel that you have. And his reason was, my troops aren't going to stop long enough to dig in. My gosh, what do you do when evening comes? Don't you stop? What do you do when you have to eat? You know, but that was his attitude. That's why nobody liked him, because of that. He died in a car crash, and there's still some doubt whether it was an accident or not. You just never know, you know. I can tell you a couple of fun things. I was in a town one time, and the Germans were right across the street from us. And I'm sitting upstairs in a window, and I'm watching out the window. I've got my rifle looking for any action, and a bomb or something hit the house, and the whole story I was on, I could feel it sliding down. It kind of slid right down the stairs, me right on the pile, and we just slowly slid down, just like slow motion, like you'd see in a cartoon. And I looked over here, and here's 3 or 4 real old coins. And I still got them at home. They're 1814 Bonaparte, and who was Bonaparte's gal? Bonaparte and whoever the woman was that he made the queen, anyway, of France. I've got those coins yet. Somebody had them there in a collection, and I was able to pick them up. Food was an A1 priority of us. One time, and like I say, the guys in the back echelon ate real good. They had big cans of peaches and tomatoes and stuff like this. We never saw that up front, except one day. A guy got up there, and he had a can of these tomatoes. And I traded him everything I had for that can of tomatoes. And I took my bayonet, and I opened it up. And while I was on guard duty that night, I ate them one at a time. And you never ate anything so good in my life. Never. If anybody had tried to steal those, I think we'd have had some problems there. I got a lot of medals, but I'm not a hero, and I want everybody to know that. All the heroes that I knew are buried over there or buried over here. It's hard to understand that, but it's true. I got this is some of my stuff here. I got 3 bronze stars. I got one of the big medals from France, one of the biggest medals that they issue, and I send it back to them with a letter to their War Department, told them to keep it. This is about 5 years ago when they turned down helping us in Iran or Iraq, remember? And we all send them back to them. A bunch of us got them, everybody that was in Normandy. We all send them back with a nice little letter to keep it, and we also told them the next time France is in trouble, don't call us, because twice we've bailed them out now from Germany. And then I got another one from the mayor of Normandy. And that one I kept. It's a beautiful gold-plated medal that thanked us for what we did and for saving Normandy from the Germans. And then I also got another one from the country of Luxembourg. And I never claimed it because they want to charge us $100 for the medal. We figured if they want to give us a medal, give us a medal. So nobody paid for it and nobody took the medal. And so, medals are just medals, but like I say, medals don't make heroes. I don't feel like a hero. We did a lot of things that you didn't have to do, but I don't feel like a hero. I can remember one night when, again, we were on a forward post and it was nighttime, and back then you didn't have cell phones. We had wires, and you had to run a wire from the post, maybe 200-300 yards, maybe a quarter of a mile back here to wherever your command post was. And if that wire got broken or bombed out or any way destroyed, you couldn't get any messages forth and back. The people wouldn't know what's going on up there. They wouldn't know if you're alive or dead. So one day, we got a shelling while we were in that house. We went down the basement. When we came up, our radio was dead. We knew then that a shell must have hit the wire back there somewhere and broke it. And it was so black, so dark out. Clouds were out every day. That's when we couldn't have Air Force cover. So I volunteered to go back and fix it. How are you going to do it? I don't know, but I'm going to fix it. I took the wire. I took my rifle, and I'm out in the dark, and I've got this wire in my hand, and I'm going like this. just like this. And I didn't know how far I had to go to find it. Finally, I got out there. I must have been, I don't know, a couple hundred yards away from the house, and I'm out in this shell blown up area, and I come to the end of the wire. Now what do? I'm feeling around. I can't find the other piece. So I took my rifle and I jabbed it in the ground, and I tied this around the trigger guard. And then I hoped I could find that rifle again by feeling for it. And then I took off as best I could, feeling for that wire. Somewhere out there, I found that other end of that wire. And then now I got to find the other end. Well, after crawling around for a while, I did find it. I got it wrapped together, and the long story is I got the phone put together again. And that was quite a thing, because there was a couple of mortar shells came in while I was there. And that's where I met Charlie. Did I tell you guys about Charlie? Charlie was a German soldier that was trying to sneak up on us one night, and somebody shot him. And he laid there for a couple of days, and he got rigor mortis, and he was just like this laying there, and he had what we called potato mashers under his arm. What it is a German hand grenade, looked just like an old-fashioned potato masher with a handle on it. They throw them, and it would go like this when they threw it. And Charlie had that under his arm like this, and he was standing up against the building dead like this. We got a shelling that night. The next morning, he was in the same position, only standing on his head, and he was still there. Well, this got to be funny then, so then we started making bets. How is he going to be the next day? See? It was kind of funny, but you know, there isn't much humor in combat. You have to laugh at anything you see. So that's just one example of how crazy a guy can get, you know. I went for 60 years without even telling my family how many Germans I had to kill. I never told anybody until a few months ago. I don't know, it just came out. I killed 6 that I know of, and probably a lot more than that, because when we were throwing those grenades, I know we killed a bunch. And another time, I shot a bazooka into a building, and I know that I killed 6 there, or thought I did, because I saw them take the bodies out of there later. And you never know, because when you're going through the woods and a German will shoot back, 3, 4 of you shoot, you don't know who got him, you know. And I'm not bragging about that, but it's just something that just came out, and I've been carrying that with me for so long that I just thought I'd tell you guys that. It's crazy, isn't it? But I think of things every day. Okay, I can tell you about a Christmas Eve that was one of the most blessed I'll ever spend, and one of the most lonely, frightening. It was Christmas night, Christmas Eve of 1944. McGee and I were in our usual foxhole, and our foxhole was in a place where we were maybe in a 20-foot elevation over a period of a couple hundred yards. We were up just high enough where we could see down, and there was part of a moon that night, and the silvery snow was kind of reflecting down there. Down below there was a big strip of woods that we knew was loaded with German soldiers. We knew they were in there, and they knew we were here too. But that day, it's almost like a truce. All shooting stopped, and you couldn't hear a sound for miles and miles. And we were feeling sad anyway. The folks at home are having their Christmas. And here we're freezing, we're starving, we're scared, we're hungry, we're cold. And all of a sudden we hear singing. The German soldiers started to sing their song Tannenbaum. Any Germans in here? The song Tannenbaum, oh Christmas tree is what it means. And they sang that song, and McGee and I just sit there and wonder. And then they went into Silent Night. They sang Silent Night. I've never heard it sing that beautiful before. It's like angels were singing it. We cried like babies. I still sometimes do when I think about it. The tears just ran down our faces, and we felt good. We felt relieved, I guess. I don't know what we felt, but for just a moment we were in heaven. We were with God. We were with the angels. We were being blessed. it's hard to explain it any farther than that. I guess you had to be there. But the next day it was business as usual. But that night was such a wonderful night, such a beautiful night. Christmas Eve, 1944. My. I could tell you a lot more stories. I'm going to skip up a bunch of them. I want to get to some other things that happened. God was with us, truly with us. They say God is with the army that's the biggest army. You know, that kind of makes some sense if you think about it. There were a lot of Germans who were Christians too, but they didn't dare show it. I took a belt buckle off a German guy. I've still got it at home somewhere. It says, God mit uns, God with us. Hitler wouldn't have allowed that. He was an agnostic. And it would have been, something different. So I know that there was Christians there. Once we got into Germany, the war changed. We didn't have to walk as much. We rode on the tanks. They assigned a squad, which is 10 or 12 men, to a tank. And what you did was you rode on the tank until there was some shooting somewhere. Then you got off the tank and you sat down. The tanks lined up, put their guns down. They leveled everything for 5 miles that they could see. And it stopped it. Incidentally, that's what I'd like to see them do today in combat over there. They get a sniper shooting at them. Instead of letting one American boy be shot, level the area and get rid of it. It's the only way. It sounds mean and it sounds cruel, but American life should be first in our book, as far as I'm concerned. That's what we were there for. We were fighting for our lives. And I want to protect them now if we can. So then we'd get back on the tanks and ride again. And we saw a lot of things. One of them that we got into, we saw the concentration camps. And the 3 that we liberated were not concentration camps, they were extermination camps. They had all the stuff in there to butcher, murder, burn, gas, choke, throw off cliffs, all that equipment to do it with. Those people were beyond being mad. They were worse than even animals respect their own. These people were like some of those that we're fighting now over there. They have no feeling for human life. None. Human life means nothing. Means absolutely nothing. And that's the way it was over there. When we entered our first concentration camp, we saw what looked like sticks ahead of us there with heads on them. And as we got closer, we saw that it was human beings that weighed about 15 pounds and had a head left on them, and they're standing there like this. They were dead on their feet and didn't know it. We tried to feed them. They brought in hot soups, things like that. Couldn't do it. They were too far gone. But it was so horrible. And when you get into the camp a little farther, the pile of bodies, I don't know why they didn't even have enough common courtesy or sense to bury the bodies as they murdered these poor people. This one pile, if it had one, it had 10,000 bodies on it, and we saw lots of piles like that. And there wasn't a person there that weighed more than 20, 30 pounds. They starved them to death. Then they hammered out any gold in their teeth. Well, you did it while they were alive. Things like that. And the horror of the murder and the killing was terrible. And then these guards, what they did, a lot of them, just before we got there, they took off their army uniforms, put on civilian clothes, and tried to mingle out with the people out in the town around so that they wouldn't be suspected of being part of them. But we picked them all up anyway. We knew any able-bodied man that was there would have been conscripted into the army, so we grabbed them all. Eisenhower came into the one camp when I was there. First thing he did, there was one of my buddies was standing there with his frozen feet, and it was miserable. And I asked him, "Are your feet cold?" He said, "Yes, sir." Okay, he said, "Well, then take my boots." He took his boots off, they were fur-lined, and gave them to the guy right in the field. And I saw Ike with just a pair of socks on walk back through that frozen mud and get in his car. But I thought that was pretty nice of the man. That endeared meet that guy. And when he ran for president, I knew that was the man. I told everybody there to take all the pictures we could get. I didn't have a camera, but those who did have took picture after picture after picture. And he said the reason is 50 years from now we're going to have people that'll say this never happened. Huh? We've got them now. They won't even believe the pictures, but it did happen. It's horror. War's horror. We had replacements come in to my company. We were a rifle company up front. That's as far up front as you can get. There's nobody but us, between us and the Germans. And we had guys come in as replacements. 2 hours later, they were dead. A lot of times they didn't know what to do. They stick their head up to see what's going on. That's a no-no. You just don't do those things. We had snipers waiting for the Germans to do that too. My friend Joe in South Carolina was one of those. He wrote a book called A Day at the Office with a World War II Sniper. That was the name of his book. Pretty interesting. I was able to get into some factories over there as we were going. I picked up a brand new German rifle at a factory and I mailed it home. And it got home, surprisingly. Most of that stuff was stolen by our own mail people in the main post office in Paris, just like they stole our gloves that were sent to us. Oh, incidentally, my brother had mailed me a pair of fur-lined gloves too. They never got there. The package got there, the cookies were in there, gloves were gone. So somebody opened it, stole them. And so we ran into that. Now, as the war was starting to draw down, and we could see that it was coming, we were getting into Austria. There's the most beautiful country you ever saw with the Alps and everything there. It's just gorgeous. But there was still, we had to be on our alert because there was a lot of German patrols out yet, and there was a lot of madmen out there that refused to give up. And we had to, every night we had a little action somewhere with them. We ran out of food over there, and this is where I did something very few people have ever done in the history of the world. We were asked, anybody who had ever gone deer hunting was asked to come to battalion headquarters. And so I went, and there were 6 other guys. We went to battalion headquarters, and the major told us, he said, our food supply has not caught up. We have no food. We got to shoot deer. All right, all the deer in Europe, I think, were jammed into about a 100-mile patch there because everywhere you looked, there was deer. I shot 106 deer one afternoon. Yep, I laid on a little hill. 2 guys handed me rifles that were loaded, and I just shot and shot. And then we had guys that went in with trucks, took the meat out. That night, everybody had 10 pounds of venison in his hand with a salt shaker, and I'll tell you what, greatest food in the world. Almost as good as those peaches or tomatoes that I had that time. Yeah, that was kind of funny, but that's the way things go. And then the food supply caught up with us, of course, and then they wouldn't let anybody shoot anything anymore. Then we went into Czechoslovakia, and I'm of Czech descent, so you ought to see how they treated me over there. Oh, geez, you'd think I was the king himself. They put one of us in every house over there. This is as the war ended. They put one of us in every house so that we had a nice place. They gave me one of those nice feather beds, and every morning I had kolaches and milk in front of me because I lived with these people, and they thought that I was, So they really took care of me, and if that wasn't something. And there was still a couple of these old Boston sergeants with us then yet. And they were still trying to make up to me. They thought that I could speak Czech and that I was going to open the doors for them for everything, Well, they got surprised in a hurry, too. But anyway, over there, I brought home a German helmet. This is a genuine German helmet that one of their boys wore in combat. And when I pulled it off from him, I broke the strap, so I didn't get the strap. But I put the helmet on my backpack and brought it home. I decided I wanted to have one, so I brought it home. And now the United States Army makes theirs just about like this, because it's better than ours was. It had a rain shield here, for one thing, to keep the rain out of your eyes. And this thing protected so the water didn't run down your neck inside your clothes. So it was better than ours, so they copied it. I have up here most of my medals, if anybody wants to look at them. This is a 9mm Luger pistol. I'll tell you where I got it. We were going through this one town, going building to building, shooting everybody that ran out of the buildings. And this German colonel ran out, and I saw him. And I ordered him, I said, "Hande ho," which means hands up. And he just looked at me, and he ran in this house, and he ran down the basement stairs, me right after him. And I hear this bang. I thought, uh-oh. So I snuck around the corner. He committed suicide. He shot himself dead with this pistol. So I took the pistol, and this was on his belt. I opened his belt and took this, and I brought the pistol home. And I've shot many rounds on it since. It's a beautiful gun. A German Luger is so neat because when you shoot it, it doesn't kick back this way. It goes up like that. It takes the kick up so you can hold it on target. I don't want to point it at anybody, but that's why the Luger was such a neat gun. It's empty. Pow, yeah. But it is empty. Pastor, I got a lot more stuff, but I don't know how much you want me to tell. I don't want to bore anybody to death, and I could go on, but the whole thing is, I'm not talking politics now. Please don't misunderstand me. But we do have to support those guys that are over there. I'm telling you, if you were with them for 5 minutes, you'd understand why. They're scared. And there's times they're hungry. And they need to know that America is behind them. They don't need to read in the paper about some jerk that burned a flag. Hope I never see one that does that. Because I'd be in jail, I'm sure. But anyhow, I love the Lord, and the Lord loves me because He's taken good care of me. Please pray for our country. Pray for our troops. Pray for all those in office. And pray for yourselves. Pray for our pastors. This is an opportunity of a lifetime for us to spend this weekend. Go visit a grave. Go to a service. And see the feelings of the people that have been there. God love you. I love you all. God bless America.